Okay, this first lecture of this chapter is just a conceptual overview. I'm going to slowly introduce you to the idea of regression as essentially a continuation and extension of what we've been doing with correlation. I know from chapter 10 how to ask questions about how two variables are related. We can talk about the magnitude of their relationship, and we can talk about the direction of their relationship. Regression allows us to extend beyond just talking about how variables are related to our ability to predict a value on a dependent variable y with knowledge of an independent variable x. And in simple regression, I'm dealing with predicting an outcome based on one independent variable, like if I want to predict SAT score from GPA. That'd be an example of a simple regression. Whereas multiple regression allows for two or more independent variables in a research design. So to stick with my prediction of SAT score, I might also want to add number of days absence in high school. So if I want to look at the relationship between attendance, GPA, and say, for example, number of extracurricular activities on high school GPA, that would be a question for multiple regression. The idea is in both cases, simple and multiple, we have only a single dependent variable. We're only trying to predict one thing. But in the case of simple regression, we have just one independent variable that we're using to predict the outcome. In multiple regression, I have two or more independent variables that I'm trying to use to predict an outcome. Now, what we're doing is we're extending the concept of correlation to the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. And this relationship is expressed by the regression line, which is the next lecture. Again, I want to highlight the difference between simple versus multiple regression. And I want to also say that logistic regression as a technique extends the family of regression techniques for dichotomous or categorical independent variables. So if I want to predict whether someone is hired or not hired, for example, with multiple independent variables, I can do that with the logistic regression. So as we kind of close out this first lecture and poise ourselves for the next one, excuse me, I want to just show you a scatter plot because this should be familiar to you. This is very similar to the types of graphs that we looked at in our chapter on correlation. This scatter plot reflects the relationship between number of prior convictions on the x-axis and the sentence length in the y-axis. And we can see, just judging from this, we have a relatively weak correlation. If I were to put a line here, the dots would be pretty far scattered from that line. But it also indicates a positive relationship such that as the number of prior convictions increases, sentence length tends to increase as well. And so against this backdrop, we can continue on to the next lecture in this series, which is the regression line.